Romney was in town.
I found out on the Facebook.
So you go over and you think, let's go demonstrate. Oh, wait, no, he's not. Maybe you, who are listening, don't want to demonstrate. Maybe you'd just like to hear what he has to say. No, you don't get a chance to do that, people. You know why? He's not speaking to the public. He's speaking to his friends. He's speaking to rich people and corporations today. It is not a public meeting. What do they mean it's not a public meeting? What the hell is that?
I assume it means that we've got too much money to have to deal with you, hoi polloi.
Yeah.
And,
the riffraff.
Right.
And so he's just talking to his friends. He's just talking to people he needs to talk to. He doesn't care about you, just like he doesn't care about releasing his tax returns. He does not need to make a speech to the people. Why should he do that? You're not electing him. The rich people are electing him. Money is electing him. We decided that with FEC versus Citizens United. We decided that super PACs can elect presidents. They can pour as much money into these things as they want. So basically, he's just coming to talk to the people he needs to talk to, which is not you and not me. So how do you feel about that?
It's what I expect.
Mm-hmm. But how do you feel about that out there in Radio Land? If you think it's bad, please don't vote for this man.
There you go.
Please do not vote for this man.
And it's not as if you don't have lots of options. If you're living in South Carolina, now we have a lot of listeners who live in other parts of the country, and your choices may not be as broad. But here in South Carolina, brothers, sisters, you're going to have a lot of choices on the ballot.
That's right.
There will be at least 5 different people on the ballot come November running for president. On the ballot in November, you have no excuses. You do not have to vote for someone you don't like.
That's right, or somebody you think is just really nasty. And now we've got his little wind-up doll that he borrowed from the Tea Party wind-up doll, Paul Ryan. It's funny because they asked a bunch of people on the street, and a lot of people seem to think that's Rand Paul.
Oh,
They've got it all
sure.
Mixed up. They don't even
the Rand and the Ryan
and the
right.
Rand and the Paul Ryan. Yeah, and people say, "Oh yeah, he's really cool. He's from Kentucky." It's like, wait, no, he's not from Kentucky. I think you mean somebody else. He's not from Texas either. That's Ron Paul. No, Paul Ryan's who we're talking about, the man who loves Ayn Rand. And I've talked about that somewhat on my blog. There are a few links if you'd like to go to daisydeadhead.com and read some more by people who are a lot smarter than me. But we don't really have a lot of time to get into that. And of course, you can go on to some of the other sites, and you can go on to some of the mainstream media has all the goods on his love affair with Ayn Rand. What people don't seem to understand about that, though, is Ayn Rand really hated Christianity and hated
very
God,
much so.
Hated duty, hated the military, which a lot of people don't know. Interesting. She basically took the very hardline libertarian view of me first. You should not have to be loyal to anything, including the government. You should not have to put yourself out there for God or country or anything else. So when he gives that line, I don't know if people realize the intellectual and ideological lineage that he is drawing on. It's quite unsavory. It's quite atheistic. She was a very proud atheist, and yet he made his aides read Atlas Shrugged.
Right.
He actually made them read this.
Well, and people need to understand too that just how extreme Ayn Rand's positions were. She not only believed that it was bad for government to take tax money and use it to help poor people. She not only thought that it was bad for you to take money and give it to poor people, she thought it was bad for you to belong to an organization that would do that.
Mm-hmm.
If you belong to a church, if you belong to a charity that did anything to benefit anybody else,
right,
you were damaging to society.
Yes.
Because you were not allowing... She was a social Darwinist of the first order.
Yes.
As far as she was concerned, anything you did that made it possible for poor people or for people who are less educated, or for people who had physical handicaps, or for people who are not mentally as sharp,
mm-hmm,
anything that you did that benefited any of those people simply harmed society.
yes,
And therefore you should be prevented from doing it.
That's right. That's right.
And it's like, this is way beyond,
mm-hmm,
I made this money, it's how I spend it is my prerogative.
Yeah, and she actually believed that the free market could not survive in that situation. The free market depended on people like herself, who were on the top of the food chain, so to speak. And she thought actually caring for poor people, well, it may help them. It may rise them up.
Exactly,
And
that's something you don't want.
Something, yeah, and
Correct.
participating in our society
Correct.
is something you do not want. This was what she said. She wrote a book titled The Virtue of Selfishness.
That's correct.
And she believed that selfishness was good, was a virtue.
Absolutely.
She wasn't saying that for shock value, people. She believed it.
And altruism was a sin.
Yes.
It wasn't just, hey, looking out for yourself is the highest possible good. Looking out for somebody else is damaging.
Yes, that is what she believed. And
this is the gal that the vice president that the Republicans are running.
No.
This is the gal that he looks to as his intellectual fountainhead.
He went to the Atlas Society meeting and praised her, a meeting of Ayn Randoids, as we used to call them in the Yippies. Atlas Shrugged, her book. There's a 64-page speech by a man named John Galt. If you've ever spent any time on the internet or on the political end of the internet, there are countless guys that when they pop up and name themselves John Galt, you think, oh boy, here we go, here's John Galt. And it tells you exactly, pretty much what they're going to say and what they're about. But it's interesting. Go read it. It speaks for itself. She said to be moral is a falsity. She thought that morality was not a choice or not a tradition or anything. She thought it was false. It was somebody else's ideals over your own. You've taken another code other than yours. She thought, duty to God, duty to a moral code of any kind is not. What is your code? It's your job to find your own. You should not have to follow anyone else's.
When Ralph Nader has gone to speak to boards of directors of companies that he owns stock in, one of the things that he's oftentimes done is he has asked them to pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. Let's have a pledge of allegiance. Part of the reason he does that is not necessarily because he thinks that's, something that a company should do as part of their procedure, but rather to point out that just as Ayn Rand says you should have no fealty to anyone other than yourself, corporations should have no allegiance to anyone but their shareholders and their profits. Corporations are no longer American corporations. They're no longer British corporations. They're no longer French corporations. They're no longer Venezuelan corporations. They're no longer Chinese corporations.
Correct.
They are international, multinational corporations who only care about how much money they can make for the people who own shares in their company.
Right.
And don't you believe for a moment, dear listener, that you're one of the people who owns shares in that company, because you don't own enough shares in any of their companies for them to give a damn about you.
That's right. And they know that. And, it's interesting. Because I see in all of this, it's interesting that now he's backpedaling. That I was inspired by Rand when I was young, which 5 years ago. But it's interesting that he is sort of backpedaling, because I think a lot of people are starting to notice and care. For instance, when I attempted to find the whole of John Galt's speech online, because somebody on a site was telling me there's nothing wrong with that, I believe that stuff, and this is somebody who considers himself a devout Christian.
Right.
I'm like, dude, so I tried to find it. So there I am. I couldn't get on to 3 or 4 sites. This was the day Paul Ryan was announced as the candidate, as the vice presidential choice. People were just inundated. I mean, people were going on to find for themselves, just like I was. It's just that they wanted to read it. I'm sure I'd read it before, but I'm sure a lot of these people had not. So people are waking up to that, and they're all going on to see for themselves. Is this really as bad as that? Let me decide for myself. Well, I want you to decide for yourself. You go right ahead and find it. It is as bad as we're saying it is. We're not painting it any more than she would have had you believe. And I want to say, because I am a nice person, and I am compassionate, or I try to be. I understand. Unfortunately, I understand where Alyssa Rosenbaum got that. I understand what it was like, or I can try. I've never lived in that situation. But, I try to have sympathy for any Jewish person under the persecution of the Soviet Union, which is where Ayn Rand, Alyssa Rosenbaum, came from. And when she moved here, she recreated herself and gave herself another name. She was not going to keep a Jewish name. She kept, and her first lieutenant, Nathaniel Brandon, was Nathaniel Blumenthal, and he became Brandon because there is the name Rand
Oh,
inside
wow.
Brandon. They became objectivists. That's what they called their philosophy. But I understand where she got that. She was under the heel of a fascist, nasty regime that used as its raison d'etre, as its excuse, that they're doing good for the workers, they're doing good for the people. They used compassion against people. That became one of the things that they lied about. They ground up people in the gulag, and all the time they were saying, we care about the workers, we care about the poor, and it was those people who they were putting in the gulag. So that was the contradiction. Instead of understanding that, what she did was decide that that philosophy of caring for the poor and caring for the workers must be the problem.
Right.
And when she came here from the Soviet Union, which is where she was from, it had basically driven her a bit psychotic. I mean, I hate to be like that, but yeah, she's very brilliant. As a woman, she had been stepped on also and not allowed to express herself as a Jewish woman. They did not want to hear anything she had to say. Certainly, you weren't allowed to speak freely in the Soviet Union. So, I understand. I have compassion for Ayn Rand. I do. I understand the situation she was in and why it drove her crazy. And as a woman, I understand how it drove her crazy. She was very brilliant and very verbal, as I am. And I can dig it, as we used to say. I'm sorry that happened to her. But as I quoted Harlan Ellison earlier, one of the people I admire, he wrote a story called Hitler Painted Roses, which always reminds me of that. I don't care, if you are spouting evil, even if you have been subjected to evil, which you probably have, and that's probably where you learned it. I don't care. You should not be permitted to spread that without criticism and without being stopped. People in this country have flocked to her philosophy. It's confused me because certainly we don't have any excuses. We are not under the heel of the socialists, although they'll try to tell you that. I don't know why people in this country have been so attracted to that philosophy. It's very confusing to me. And certainly people like Paul Ryan, who consider themselves devout Catholics, I don't get it at all, because she hated William F. Buckley for being a devout Catholic. She thought he was totally compromised in his conservatism. He tried to go up and talk to her at an event once that they were both there, and she insulted him and said, let him go to hell in his own way. And she took it personally. He thought it was going to be like, well, we argue on TV, but
right, we'll be collegial.
We'll be pleasant, because he was of that class of people that thought that behavior was, that's the way you act. I mean, you're not a nasty person all the time. Yes, she was. It was personal for her. To her, he was just as dangerous as any lefty, because he was trying to say conservatism could be religious. So keep in mind the person your vice presidential candidate finds his guru. She's very dangerous. I think she's done immense damage to the body politic. I think she's done immense damage to the dialogue surrounding capitalism. If anybody makes a bad case for capitalism, it's Ayn Rand. And yet Paul Ryan says she's made the best case for capitalism. So you think about that. It's not like he doesn't know what he's saying, because he gave the books out to his aides. He knows exactly what he's saying, and now he's trying to pretend he didn't, because he never thought he'd be in this position where he would actually be running for vice president. And now he's nervous. Now he's got to backpedal quick.